Hi, Chris Williams here, licensed marriage and family therapist and co-host of New Life Live, and I'm here to talk about the struggle that we have with ourselves of perfectionism and disappointment and an internal struggle that we enter into when we expect something of ourselves and we can't get there. I think that most of us deal with this problem, and I think it starts here. We have this view of ourselves that I will call the ideal self. And the ideal self sits way up here. And we believe that we will be okay, we will have made it, we will be who God wants us to be, we will be the Christian or the actualized person, as we say in psychology, way up here when we hit the ideal self. But here's the problem. The problem is we wake up in the morning and oftentimes the real self is down here. Our real experience and who we really are down here. And then there's this gap between the ideal self and the real self. And this creates a real dilemma and potentially powerful problem. Because oftentimes what many of us do is in the space in between our ideal self and our real self sits a lot of disappointment, a lot of frustration. I wish I could be more. It also comes with a lot of shoulds. I should be like this. I should do that. And then subtly what comes into that space in between the ideal and the real self is a powerful force called shame. And shame is utilized in these areas to try to get the real self to the ideal self. But here's the irony. It has like a drug-like effect. You see, when we use shame like, hey, you're not good enough and you've got to be better, or you're unworthy, and so you've got to improve in this area of your life to become worthy or lovable, it usually has this very short bump, almost like a drug-like effect. We can correct for a little bit, but shame doesn't have sustainable energy for growth. And so what it does is then it just drops back into the real self and maybe even a little bit lower. So here is what we want to put in the space in between our ideal self and our real self. I want you to try this. If you struggle in this area, put grace there. And that may sound a little bit flowery. It may sound like, nice words, Chris, but what does that actually mean? Well, the first movement of grace is acceptance. And when we start with acceptance, not condemnation, and when we apply this to our real self and we observe ourself, we see ourselves with compassion, with curiosity, and then with acceptance. It's not that we agree with every part of ourselves. It's not that we agree with the things that we struggle with. It's not that we're co-signing this sin within us by any means. It just means that we accept it as a reality. And then if we apply things like care and compassion, we're going to need to apply courage and support and help. What grace then does is it starts moving us a little bit closer to the ideal self. I don't think the ideal self is necessarily a bad or wrong thing. I think it helps provide us a North Star of who we can become, but we got to be careful with it. Because when we live in a when mentality, when I will hit the ideal self, then I will be okay, it leads to a miserable life because we'll never be the ideal self. We'll never be our most perfect and actualized person. We will need to be walking a road paved with grace the rest of our lives. And the first movement of that, again, is to circle back and accept what I have today. In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says this: acceptance is the answer to all of our problems today. It might be a little bit overstated, but I like its sentiment. If we start with acceptance, it gets us into reality, and reality helps us work with the raw material of transformation and change. When we partner that with God and His work within us, as well as the community around us that He provides, we can start moving the needle a little bit more towards the ideal self. And what we want to become is a little bit better, but not perfect. I like to use this term. I'm not looking to get all the way there, but I am looking to move the needle. Acceptance is our chance to move the needle today. Thank you, and I wish you well on your journey.